What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Before the Whistle. I'm your host, Makhi Hughes, and I am here to break down the Green Wave's 29-16 win over the UTSA Roadrunners final week of the regular season to make them the hosts of the American Athletic Conference Championship 2 seasons running. And I just, again, want to go back down this memory lane, for lack of a better phrase, of all the worrying, needless at that I think Tulane fans kind of went through this season, wondering if the offense was ever going to get it together, wondering if the team would be able to play a complete third quarter or a complete game, this idea of chasing the perfect game, that they're going to run into an opponent where whatever they've been doing that's gotten them to X category of wins and one loss all season long is suddenly going to catch up to them. I think people, if anything, their expectations kind of put their foot in their mouth. And this is something that I've been trying to get through on this show for the last several weeks, is it really does not matter, again, if a win is by 20 points, by 1 point, if it comes in overtime, if it has to be because of a play on special teams. Winning teams win games and figure out ways to get that done week after week after week. This comment that Tyler Grubbs made, transfer linebacker, came in this year, arguably one of the players of the game in this final game. I always go back to what he said during the spring, which was, I transferred to Tulane because I wanted to go somewhere where they were contending for a championship, where they were a group of winners. They'd figured that out, and I want to see what that's all about. And at the time, it still kind of felt like, oh, this is really weird to hear a player describing Tulane as, but honestly, these players have really just grinded out what'll probably be looked back on as, again, the most underrated season, that was a lot more difficult game by game, snap by snap, that I don't think people really were always aware of or keeping in mind as the season went on, keeping in mind that injuries accumulate, that Tulane really hadn't had all starters on their O-line since the start of conference play. And the fact that they were able to go undefeated in conference play with injuries to left guard, right tackle for multiple games at that, and have guys like Shadre Hurst and Trey Tuggle be able to come in and play multiple positions is just not something to sneeze at. To have a guy that could come in, play right guard, right tackle, and Tuggle, left guard, and right tackle, and Shadre Hurst, having Josh Remitich come back for this game and be able to play a lot in this game, as well as having Rashad Green back, made a huge difference. Tulane dominated this game on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football. And I think the last time you really looked at a game and said that was so overwhelming for Tulane was the Ole Miss loss, where that game was a one-score game until 2:56 left in the matchup, and they have their backup quarterback. This team never quit, and they kept playing until the final whistle. And I think that loss really stuck with those guys. I just, again, face such a quality opponent and know that you've been able to hold your own against them for all of 4 quarters, and the end score doesn't really reflect that. I think you've seen a little bit of a chip on shoulder identity come out for Tulane in this idea of, oh, well, they're winning, but they're not winning convincingly. Okay, at what point, again, does that lose out to the fact that they have won 7-8 games in a row, gone undefeated in conference play? And this was my big thing for Tulane going into this UTSA matchup, was Tulane's ready for this moment. I don't know if UTSA is. I don't know enough about UTSA. Again, a new conference opponent, but one really set up and touted as that kind of spoiler upset to Tulane. And I don't know if it was just that narrative, or, again, the idea that Tulane hasn't been scoring that many points. Just if you look at what their defense has been doing on a week-by-week basis, you look at the fact that this is the year that clock rules changed in college football. And I think a lot of teams went on in spite of those new rules. I think there are a lot fewer teams that said, why don't we take a step back here and perhaps see if we can use these clock rules to our advantage? I really think you're seeing that happen in Tulane. I think you're seeing it happen. It has. It got them to, again, an 11-1 record, having a freshman running back in Makhi Hughes not be named the starter until Memphis, and still be the only player in Tulane history, a history that includes Tajay Spears, only player besides Matt Forte to have 7 100-yard games in 1 year. And again, he wasn't the starter for half of the season. And when Matt Forte was at Tulane, he was Tulane. He was the running game. He was the receiving game. I mean, the offense lived and died largely by Matt Forte during his stretch here, not so much by Makhi Hughes. Now, that being said, You know that you can rely on him in critical moments. You know that you can get those key conversions on downs. You know that he can throw one hell of a block and pick up blitzes and be a genuine pass protector back there for Michael Pratt. And that to me has been just the single underrated part of Makhi Hughes' game, has not been his yards after contact, even though that's just been ridiculous. It's not been the 100-yard output. It's been being so solid back there in all facets of the game that your quarterback doesn't have to think twice about it. And yes, this was a game that was definitely not Michael Pratt's, I guess, finest outing, but how much can you really, again, say against a team that was leading the conference in sacks, tied fourth in the nation at that, had 39 through 11 games. And yeah, Tulane got their starters back. This was the first week that they really were but really had all of them in that 5-man rotation and not this shuffling of parts. And Michael Pratt had time to throw. Now, did those throws always connect? No. Some of it was good coverage. Some of it was the fact that Chris Brazzell, again, is largely getting that wide receiver 1 type treatment. I don't think Keith Brown, even though he played, was at 100%. And Jaquan Jackson being, I think, really that difference maker, and one that I think you'll expect to see this weekend. I'm not saying for sure. I don't know anything, but he was probably not for the last game. I was surprised to see him really participating in warmups. And I think the idea, again, was get through that game. You get him back, and then the offense just really changes with a healthy Keith Brown and a Jaquan Jackson out there. You're just able to do so much more. But the fact is, Tulane's still winning football games without their starting personnel, with a quarterback that you can never tell if he's 100%, 50%. He's always bleeding. He's always going to be taking those hits, but just when you think he's limping around and might be called off the field, well, he suddenly converts a 3rd down on a 26-yard gain and does it with pretty fresh legs, if you ask me. We haven't really seen Michael Pratt rush as much in these last couple of games. I don't know if that is a health thing. I don't know if that's a scheme thing. I don't know if it's a marriage of those two, where you're trying to protect your quarterback whose best trait is his same fatal flaw, and doing that within your scheme by not having him have that many designed runs. But this was a game where the chips came down to it. Can you make those key conversions? And Tulane made more of them than UTSA. They made way less mistakes than UTSA. And Frank Harris, I mean, he comes into this game, he had 411 passing yards the week prior and 112 rushing yards. Yes, it was USF. Again, it really doesn't matter. Tulane, it's not even the numbers. I'll pull them up, but I mean, he threw for 198 yards. He rushed for 28, but he looked pedestrian. He looked frazzled. He looked like every play he was running for his life. And even the announcers were saying, it's not even rolling out away from the pressure. You're just rolling into more pressure at that. I mean, Tulane has been a team where they have consistently been able to rotate guys on the defensive line all season long. They've suffered some injuries here and there, but those guys have just been an absolute difference maker. And it's not lost on me that, again, last year, UTSA was in the same conference as Troy, which is where Sheil Wood came from as defensive coordinator. Believe he held them to 10 points in their lowest output of the year, if I'm correct. And I mean, again, he clearly has the kryptonite to these guys. That being said, coaching only matters if the players are able to make the plays on the field when the plays are in front of them. And you credit the coaching staff for putting these guys in the position to make the plays, but credit to every level of this defense. As someone that loves defense, you could not ask for more than Devin Deal, a defensive lineman, dropping back into coverage to cover a wheel route, and then he makes an interception. Having, Cam Pettisclo just be an absolute terror out there, breaking up passes, forcing a fumble that Jared Small recovered. And yes, you could go back and forth on, did UTSA beat themselves or did Tulane beat them? And I think depending on the fan base that you're talking to, you'll get a different answer here and there, but it is not a complete, again, yes, you have a team that's playing down. You have a team that has to play from a deficit and be a little more risky at that, knowing that you're going up against a team that you don't know how many more times you're going to get the ball back in that game. You still have to credit Tulane for putting themselves in the position to make those turnovers. Again, the first turnover was a pass breakup by Cam Pettisclo. That DJ Douglas intercepted. That's 2 players there in a matter of seconds, where Cam Pettisclo just has the perfect timing to knock that ball up in the air, give his safety a chance to make the play, and he makes it. And then their next series is when Devin Deal makes that interception. And at that point, you can't argue anything where, yeah, Tulane took the ball and in 3 plays scored a touchdown after the defense gave it to them for that interception. But UTSA, you probably assume that you're good throwing against a guy like Devin Deal in coverage, and he just flew to that football like no other. And then UTSA scores on their next drive, and then it kind of comes into this game of punt, 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 punt. Where, yeah, there was a point in this game where I believe UTSA took a short lead on that field goal, and I will just be correct on that. Yeah. And then Tulane immediately matched them with a field goal after having punts on the last couple of series. It's going to be impossible to say, and you're never going to get an answer on this. And I don't know if it's so much a subconscious or a conscious decision in the moment, but in terms of play calling, I think it just sticks out again that every time Tulane has to convert, has to get points on the board, not so much has to, but important in those situations, you see Tulane be able to do that. You saw Valentino Ambrosio matches, I believe, career high at 47 yards, like it was nothing. And there is a weird situation on that play. And I tried to read my clock management book to get some sense of it, where Tulane ran out the field goal unit. It was following a penalty on 3rd down on UTSA, and it reset the game clock from 8 seconds to 10 seconds. And Tulane had 1 timeout left on the board. If I could read lips, and I'm not good at it, there was a point where they cut to Willie Fritz on the sideline, and he was clearly saying something like, or does it start when the ball is snapped? Because when there's a play that starts after a penalty, and it's up to the quarterback, but does the clock start when we snap the ball, or does it start when the referee signals? And I think that's what they were trying to get an answer on. My only thinking there is, I don't know how the 10-second runoff rule plays into timeouts, but that being something that's a possibility, you get a penalty on that play, and then you're out of seconds, even though you have a timeout in your pocket. And I think, again, that confusion where the clock started running and then they had to use that final timeout, kick a field goal. I don't know what was going on before that, but either way, you assumed Tulane was probably going to kick the field goal. And what they did again was run that clock down, where, yeah, there would have been like 8 seconds left on the clock, but it gave Tulane 3 points going into half, following another. This is where you could say UTSA was shooting themselves in the foot, where, what are you doing having your tight end throw on a 4th down, where, if you want to talk about going for a field goal on 3rd down, why are you having that happen where it's obviously not your punter? That only really works where you had a Ryan Wright in Tulane, where we didn't see as much as I would have liked to. He actually threw a fake punt on the Vikings against the Saints in London last year. If you want to go check that out, those plays only really work when it's someone that is credibly going to be punting the ball. And if you're going to throw it in that situation, why not just show your cards and keep your quarterback out there? And I don't like to really criticize other coaches, but their coach after that to say, I wish that he had thrown it out of bounds. Why are you putting your tight end in a position to really have to make that decision either way? Because either way, you're turning it over on downs there. Yeah, there was the possibility that they could return that for a pick 6. But again, if you're just planning on throwing the football, put your quarterback out there and put the guy that's throwing the ball in a position to make the catch. And you could see Patrick Jenkins, who was out there, immediately point back to, I believe it was Shaquem Laster and Tahir Noor, the one who ended up making the interception, where that whole play, they're just staring down the eyes of Oscar Cardenas, the tight end, and waiting for him and making their break accordingly. Now you compare that to what Tulane did, I believe, on the series immediately after that, and one that caught me off guard. They trot Kai Horton out there and didn't really feel like anyone noticed, to be entirely honest with you, including UTSA, where you could see them really kind of pick up on the fact that there was a tight end standing up at the punter's position for Tulane. It just kind of felt like Kai just calmly walked out there and no one read his number. But it just didn't really seem like they knew that was going to happen at all. And it's a tough situation where, yeah, the gunner got a penalty. And is that really fair when it's a special teams play? Well, clearly it's within the rules. And that was an example of Tulane using the rules better than you. And I just think that is so much of their identity this year, is playing with the rules to really put their team in an advantageous position. And you really saw that close out this football game for them, despite only scoring 6 points in the second half of the game. I always check my notes as I go from my first half to second half analysis. And just to be correct here, that was Tulane's second field goal where that third down play, where they kicked it on third down, the 47-yarder. And now that I'm saying this, there's no way that kind of mess gets trotted out where Valentino Ambrosio was tying a career long. It was their 23-yard field goal that actually was extended on that drive by the fake Kai Horton pass. Not the fake. I mean, he threw a pass. They got a pass interference on it. And then they drove down and kicked that field goal. And that was following where they had their fake punt. And this was after Tulane had scored another touchdown to go up. Why am I so bad at math? 21 to 10 at half. Then they kick that field goal, go up 23-10, where I think you're seeing, that desperation start to sink in for UTSA. I want to go back to the idea of Tulane playing a good third quarter, because there was a stretch this season where the offense was getting nothing going in the third quarter and the defense was almost in adjusting. It was like whatever was going on in the first quarter, the adjustments were just not happening in the third quarter. And the ECU game was when things started to change, at least in the way that Tulane prepared for the second half of games. I think there's something to be said about just upping the intensity going back into the game, but as in terms of that making that big of a difference, it's definitely up for question. But I think this all comes down to a question of opinion, because do you consider a 0-0 output in the third quarter great or bad? And I think there's a conversation to be had either way. But this is, again, a game where at this point, I think UTSA has 1 turnover left to go. They had 4 turnovers going into halftime. They were able to score 10 points and just were, again, acting frantic and acting frazzled. And I think a team can smell blood in the water, and Tulane definitely did. And they're nursing a 13-point lead. Their defense is just completely shutting down the other team. And as I was starting to go through these drives, it stuck out to me that, after that third quarter shutout, I started paying attention to how much time was on the clock in between each play for Tulane, because this game, the time of possession was actually in UTSA's favor. They had a slight edge where they had it for 31 minutes and 42 seconds. Tulane had it for 28 minutes and 18 seconds. Tulane ran 63 total plays. UTSA ran 79 total plays. And I think Tulane got the majority of those plays out in the first half. And that's where they got 23 of their 29 points accordingly. But to just go through these drives as this game closes out, where, again, Tulane gets the ball out at halftime and they go 3 and out and punt it. They also pretty much at this point, I think, settled into running out the clock, running the football. UTSA takes them 5 minutes. They get 21 yards on 9 plays. I mean, it's just, they're getting the key third, fourth down conversions when it mattered, and then absolutely nothing the rest of the time. And this is still the third quarter. Tulane has the ball for 1 minute and 54 seconds. They punt, they run 5 plays there. UTSA fumbles on their next drive. And then Tulane has one of their longer drives of the game where it's 8 plays, 42 seconds long. They end up punting it. That's where that key run by Michael Pratt came in to really take this game into the fourth quarter, where I looked at it again at that point, and there was 3:23 left in the third quarter, and Tulane ran that all the way down to the ground. And when Michael Pratt took off for that run, there's 2:01 left on the game clock. They took that next play, which was a run play to Makhi Hughes, 1:25 left on the clock, 3 seconds left on the play clock. They let the play clock run down. They used motion with about 10 seconds left in order to kind of, again, just waste a little bit more time. But it just stuck out to me that they in 2 plays basically just let 2 minutes go off of the clock. And then this is where I started really paying attention to this, where I just looked at the clock, looked at how much time was left, and UTSA on their next drive, they turn it over on downs after running 8 plays, takes them 3 minutes and 8 seconds. Tulane punts it after running 4 plays that take 2 minutes, 27 seconds. That's 4 less plays, and they ran 30 seconds less off the clock than UTSA did. It goes for the same thing in the next drive where Tulane takes twice as long as them. They turn it over on downs again. They go for 4 plays, 1:08. Tulane scores their final touchdown of the day on 5 plays, but those 5 plays take 2 minutes and 8 seconds. And that point in the game, there were 7:26 left on the clock before Tulane scored that final touchdown, where now it's 29-10. And UTSA gets the ball back with 5:18 left in this football game and down at that point somewhere in the 3-score deficit. That was the game. That Michael Pratt run was, quite frankly, the football game. And this game really ended in the third quarter to me, where where you just look at Tulane running as many, if not 1 or 2 plays more or less than UTSA and taking double off the clock in order to do so. That's a team that is paying very keen attention to the fact that their opponent is desperate. They're not wasting the game clock in the same way that they are. And Tulane took really high advantage of that. Now, I went so far as to break this down in the third and fourth quarter, where it was really weird. It's very rare that this happens, where UTSA and Tulane both third and fourth quarters were the exact same in time of possession. UTSA winning that with 8 minutes and 1 second in both quarters. Tulane having 6:59 in those 2 quarters. So, I mean, UTSA having essentially 1 more minute than Tulane. In that time frame, UTSA ran 41 plays to Tulane's 28. And both of the teams had 6 points in total to show for that. If you want to break it down further, on average, UTSA, that's 23.46 seconds per play in the second half based on their time of possession, running those 48 plays. And again, Tulane with 28 plays, a minute less in both quarters, taking on average 29.92 seconds per play. That's again a difference of about 6 seconds per play. And we're talking about a game that we have eliminated so many plays in the game. You're just seeing efficiency take off tenfold for Tulane. You're seeing them rely on a ferocious defense and the clutch play of Michael Pratt when it comes down to it, where it's something like 9 total completions in this game. Obviously not a great outing for your quarterback, but when it counted in that final drive, he makes 2 passes to score a touchdown. That was the drive before they just kneeled it and ran the clock out. But he makes a 22-yard pass on third down to Chris Brazel, and then another pass just a few plays later in the end zone to Brazel as well. Perfectly placed balls, and that's what you get in a quarterback like Michael Pratt. You get clutch play, you get that fourth quarter ability, and you just look back at the Cotton Bowl, where I believe prior to that final drive for Tulane, he had something like 2 completions all game, and he completely took it over with his legs and in the air. And you saw him do that again in this game, and it might not have been as dazzling because there was no magical comeback to be had. I think, again, the reason that you're lacking the magic this year is because Tulane is doing what it's supposed to do and what they are setting out to do, and that's winning a football game. It's not style points. It's not impressing the pollsters. It's not trying to go toe for toe against the Heisman Trophy winner, because they haven't had to all year long. And the biggest quarterback test they faced was in Frank Harris, where he has a 7-year veteran back there. Much like Michael Pratt, he leads his program in all-time yards. Neither team had lost a game this year since both Pratt and Harris returned under center. And you just can't ignore a game where he passes for 411 yards and rushes 112. And then Tulane just completely shuts down UTSA. Sure, they had something like 40 more yards than Tulane. Again, they also ran a ton more plays and had to go for it on fourth down 6 times. Tulane didn't go for it on fourth down that game. The only time they did was that fake pass to or that fake play, where I'm actually not really sure why that's not showing up on the score sheet. But all that to say, it's just the complete antithesis of a team that's desperate, a team that is turning the ball over as a result of playing, again, a little frazzled, but playing frazzled because they have all 3 levels of this defense tearing down their throat. I mean, I didn't even get to the play of the defensive backs like Jarius Monroe in coverage and in run stopping. Same with Bailey Despaney, DJ Douglas, Kentrell Webb, who comes in, makes a huge difference. Lance Robinson, I believe, was one of the other guys that forced a fumble for Eric Hicks to recover. I mean, those are defensive backs stripping footballs left and right and breaking up passes, being in those positions to make those coverage plays. And sometimes, if you ask me, committing what are called, I'd say, professional fouls, where you just look at that final 2-point attempt and yes, Jarius Monroe had a defensive pass interference. Well, okay, you get one more try and one less yard to try and make a very similar play. It just doesn't really change what your play call is going to be there. And it just reminds me so much of in soccer where there was a game where like it was somewhere towards the end of the game, a complete mess had happened and our goalie had slipped and fell over. I saw that behind me. There was a girl coming and I knew, well, if I don't take her down, it's an open goal. Whereas take the professional foul, I'm not going to kill her. I'm not like that. But yeah, I took the yellow card, I took the foul, and the girl missed the PK. So that's essentially what they did in this instance. And then Tyler Grubbs says hello and goodbye to the AAC. I mean, that I have it actually recorded on my phone just because sometimes I like to get the atmosphere where I'm down on the sideline, but I'm in the mode of running up to the press box. And so, not filming at the expense of my job, but being in the end zone, I just took my phone out, and that stop by Tyler Grubbs was, I mean, a thwack heard around the world. And SMU should be fearing this team. I really have to say, I feel so bad for Preston Stone, and I hate that he's not going to get this opportunity and that Tulane's not going to get that opportunity. But ultimately, Tulane is in a very different position with a quarterback that has only thrown something like 22 passes all year, where you saw them make, again, a veteran quarterback look like this was his first game out there. He looked like at times Ian Book in his first game for the Saints. If people had the displeasure of watching that. And I think Frank Harris is a great quarterback. He didn't look like one. And that was credit to Tulane's defense, not to mention special teams playing a huge role in this game, including the returns by Tulane and the stops by Tulane. And again, one of those fake punts, having that interception and being prepared for that, and then having a little trick play in Tulane's arsenal with Kai Horton. And I'll admit, I haven't really seen them practice that in front of my eyes. And I saw a lot of plays today that I have not seen all year. And I will leave it at that from practice today. But I think there's something to be said about keeping your cards close to your chest and paying attention to the clock, paying attention to time of possession, how many possessions it's going to take for you to win and for the other team to win. And Tulane has just put on a masterclass in these new clock rules to me this year with their identity of running the football, letting the play clock run down, and just shutting teams out of a chance in the second half where, yeah, again, despite UTSA having the ball more than Tulane, they had to take twice as many shots in order to do so. Whereas Tulane gets out there and they are comfortable just running 4 plays, knowing that they're going to punt, knowing that they just wasted 2 precious minutes off the clock for a team that is more desperate for them than they are, knowing that their defense can make this stop. And the only times where, again, they needed to get things done, they got them done every single time. And that's all you can ask for from a team. And to me, this is just a different feel from last year where, again, it was, oh my God, this is the biggest opportunity for Tulane in 83, 84 years, what have you. I mean, sure, they've never sustained success like this before, but they've been to the big dance before. And there are a lot of guys on this roster that were there and know what winning on that big stage takes. Equally important to me are the guys that are on this roster still from the 2-10 year, and they know how much it sucks to lose, and they know how hard it is to win on a game-by-game basis. And I think you're seeing the perfect marriage of knowing what it's like to lose and learning how to win through that, and then watching them do that last year translate into a team that has had way less talent on a week-by-week basis. When you look at, again, the injuries to quarterback and to skill players and the offensive line for Tulane, that's something that should kill most teams, and it just hasn't. They adapt their game plan. They rely on their running back that everyone knows is going to do what he's going to do, and they dare them to stop them every single time. Tulane really was just showing their cards against UTSA. There was nothing fancy. There was nothing spectacular about most of, if not all of the plays that Tulane ran. They executed them well, and they just, to me, they played like they knew they were the better team out there, and that showed. And it's as convincing of a victory you could look at, where I said at the beginning of this game, I mean, kind of to myself, kind of the broadcast crew, where I would have been equally, or if not, unsurprised by any result, being it a high scoring output or a low scoring output. But my gut told me it was going to be on the lower side. I can't say I saw the defense holding a team that passed for 411, 419. There was another quarterback that threw a pass, and on top of their quarterback's 112 rushing yards, just completely shut down what everyone was touting as the best offense in the AAC. And I think you're starting to see the payoff again of those close wins, where I've continued to say, I think it's a lot harder to win close than it is to blow out a team, where the other team starts panicking, the other team starts playing prevent. You can pass the ball a lot more. You could exhaust the other team. I mean, it just opens up your arsenal for what you're able to do. But every game for Tulane has been a grinder because they are getting every opponent's best punch in the face on a week-by-week basis. You can't say that about these two teams in UTSA or SMU that Tulane has been set to face these last 2 weeks. That's, to me, the huge difference maker that you saw, where Tulane was ready for that moment. UTSA, for whatever reason or not, was not. And I think you could argue that they got out-coached by a coach that should be getting way more credit than he has for these week-by-week wins, where he said this last week, all it matters is that you win by 1 point. And all of this talk about the pollsters and Tulane not being in control of their destiny, if they keep winning these close matchups, they really need to put a team away. I mean, to me, this is putting a team away and putting some extra dirt on it, where it just felt like UTSA from the second quarter on, if we're being honest, really just had no chance. I don't care what the announcers were saying about the momentum shifting. It really never did on the field. It never did in Tulane's style of play calling. Meanwhile, again, you saw UTSA going for it on fourth down pretty often and pulling a lot of plays out of their arsenal to try to make it work. You just saw Tulane say, okay, we'll just wait. We'll just wait for the clock to run out. We'll wait for them to keep making these mistakes. We're not going to make those mistakes on our part after starting off the game with a mistake on a fumble. I guess not starting out. They score that touchdown, and then defense gets another interception and they fumble the ball away. That was really the last mistake Tulane made all game. UTSA just continued to make those mistakes, but Tulane defenders also put themselves in the position to not just recover the fumbles, but to force them, to force these plays. Again, it was a masterclass. It's one that, if you have any qualms about Tulane's ability to hang in these big games, defense, to me, is what wins you championships. And if you ask USC last year if they wanted some more points, or if they would have preferred a defense that could stop a running play worth a damn, I think that they would answer the latter. And you just look at how Tajay Spears gashed up USC's defense last year, exhausted them. And when they had to make those plays in the air, they were able to, but it's just easier said than done. And Tulane's been able to do that with Makhi Hughes so many times this year as well, but they haven't had to match the absurd output of a Heisman Trophy winner, where their defense this year, again, USC would be clamoring for the number 2 rush defense. I don't know what they are after that game, but if they didn't, they might have gone down just because of a few gains here and there, but still no 100-yard rusher in that game. And it just feels like by the third series for UTSA, they were already on their third running back. So they threw the kitchen sink at trying to get their run game established. And when you can't get your running game going, it makes you a very one-dimensional team. If you're asking me, would I rather have a great run game or a great passing game? I'm going great run game every single time, because a great running game can compensate for a lot. A great passing game is only as good as its best plays and their ability to convert those types of downs, those key third downs, fourth downs. If you're going for a fourth down, being able to run the ball on third, knowing that you'll be able to get some of that yardage and make it either a tush push type play that Tulane has done very well at this year, or just again, fourth and manageable. Well, if you're making teams have to throw on first, second, third down, and they were throwing on first down a lot more often as the game went on, well, it just makes your playbook a lot more closed off, and it makes your team just a lot more desperate. It makes those big plays happen. It makes those mistakes happen. You see none of those things in Tulane. So they have an extra day of rest. This is, I mean, arguably the most important game in Tulane history, if you ask me. I remember people, when I went on a lot of Ole Miss radio shows and local appearances here, people asking me, is this the most important game in Yulman Stadium history? A lot of people felt like it was. Corey, Steve, and myself, broadcast crew, we all felt like the championship game was infinitely more important to like the legacy of this program. But last year's conference championship, to me, just pales in comparison to the opportunity for Tulane to go back to back as the G5 program, to go to the New Year's Six, where they are the highest ranked group of 5 team. They have their second chance at beating a ranked opponent. I think first chance. I don't know how. I'm totally losing track of time here where whenever the rankings become official, what have you, Ole Miss. But, this is an opportunity. Yes, they're ranked 25th. Yes, they're down their starting quarterback, but such is unfortunately life. Such was Tulane when they faced Ole Miss, and they gave them 3 quarters and 10 odd minutes or so of their best punch possible, keeping it a 1-score game and leading at half at that. So of all teams, I just don't think Tulane is going to fall asleep at the wheel here. If anything, Willie Fritz was really getting up on guys for the intensity today at practice, reminding them that there are guys around the country who would die for the opportunity to have one more game and a home game at that, to be able to have this game at home and be able to have the opportunity to knock off another opponent leaving for greener pastures, except this time one that's buying their way into greener pastures, would just be the cherry on top of an incredible season for this team. One that to me is so much more impressive than last year because no one expected it. If we're being honest, all of the radio calls I did over the summer, how are they going to replace Tajay Spears? How are they going to replace Nick Anderson, Dorian Williams, all of the guys at safety, at nickel and Macon Clark, Larry Brooks, Lummy Young, Tajay Spears, Will Wallace, Tyreek James, Shea Wyatt, Deuce Watts. I mean, their top receiving options last year, their top blocking tight ends against the run at that, in which the tight ends this year have been incredible with their blocking against the run, just to throw that into the wind as well. But losing again a generational talent in Tajay Spears, you kept your quarterback, you kept your OC as a consistent thing from last year, even though it was not named officially in title, but there was so much change all over the place, so much turnover, and being picked to win the conference, not being the team that no one saw coming because they won 2 games the year prior. This was a team that won 12 games, beat the Heisman Trophy winner as the sole G5 representative in the New Year's Six, picked to win the conference for the first time ever. And Tulane made it out with 1 loss to a Power 5 team, down their starting quarterback, one that you could argue they were winning the line of scrimmage battle very late into that football game at that. And when you could go toe for toe against a Power 5 program in the trenches, that is more impressive than any skill player you can put out there on the field. And I think you've seen that both in the offensive line and the defensive line for this Tulane team. That is a terror in the trenches, and one that I'm looking forward to seeing take full form with a little more health this Saturday. I hope y'all are able to come out. I will be doing another preview episode this week, but I just wanted to give the flowers to all the guys in that game against UTSA in all 3 phases of the game. Again, with Valentino Ambrosio tying his career high, being perfect on the day, the defense just being insane, and the offense scoring when it needed to score and never making this feel like it was a game where the defense had to win it for them. Yes, there were stretches where neither team was scoring, but when that gets a defense going. And if anything, I think the defense rejuvenated themselves over and over to just want to keep going out there and making plays. And momentum on the sideline, just the feeling and the air is something that's always very palpable, especially at home games where you could feel the energy of the crowd as well. And even when the crowd might have waned here and there, those players were fired up that whole game. And you could just tell that they saw the finish line in their eyes, and they were not going to let anyone stop them. And that's what makes winners. And that's what gets you to 11-1. That's what gets you to 1-0 week by week by week. I said, if this game ends with a Tulane win, then this is the ultimate thesis statement for 1-0 with everything they've had to battle this year. And you just saw them make a case for it to build its own statue. So with that, y'all, I'll see you on Friday.